It is said that Western media is biased on reporting political events in India. A country with the largest number of population and a country of 3 billion square kilometers is likely to elicit diverse impression from diverse world population. Here is an Indian commentator claiming that Western media reporting about India has been dominantly negative since India achieved independence in 1947. He points out how a British institution like BBC transmits biased commentary on political events in India with special reference to Hindus. Let's take a listen.
So, organizations like the BBC, they've always had a strong bias against India. This has been in place since the Indians got independence. And these people always seem to focus on India as a country which has a huge problem, even though there are countries around the world engulfed in civil wars, massive civil rights violations and things like that. But India seems to be a large focus of a lot of these organizations when it comes to painting countries in a negative light. In fact, they've also started to show this kind of bias towards their own people now. So whenever there is an issue, these organizations tend to paint a one-sided picture of that issue. And when they're talking about India as well, they're specifically talking about the Hindus. They talk about how the Hindus are horrible people whose sole goal is to persecute the minorities, persecute women, and persecute everybody around them.
Here, another Indian commentator is referring how New York Times projects India's mission in Mars to their audiences in a blatantly derogatory fashion. Let's listen to his narratives.
न्यूयॉर्क टाइम्स ने भारत विरोधी एजेंडा पहली बार नहीं चलाया, बल्कि इससे पहले भी वो भारत विरोधी पत्रकारिता करता रहा है। इस अखबार ने ये कार्टून उस वक्त छापा था जब भारत का मंगल मिशन कामयाब हुआ था, मंगलयान कामयाब हुआ था। इस अखबार ने अपने कार्टून में भारत का मजाक उड़ाया था। आप देख सकते हैं, एक तरफ एलिट स्पेस क्लब है जिसमें पश्चिमी देशों के लोग बैठे हुए हैं और उस स्पेस क्लब में एक भारतीय खटखटा रहा है दरवाजा खोलने के लिए कह रहा है और उस भारतीय के हाथ में एक बैल भी है। यानी भारत की छवि वो इस तरीके से देखते हैं।
This is not the first time New York Times is promoting anti-India reporting. They are known to have been practicing anti-India journalism before also. New York Times published this cartoon when India successfully launched Mangalan mission to Mars. This is to ridicule India's achievement. You can see in the cartoon, on one side, there is the elite space club where members of Western countries are sitting inside. Outside is an Indian knocking and appealing to open the door of the club. The Indian is shown to be holding a bull. This is how they project the image of India. Several Indian media reacted sharply to this derogatory projection of Indian achievements. This is clearly an expression of contempt that political circle of Anglo-American West has in their DNA for India and its elites, like the impression French has for the elites of Ivory Coast, Senegal, Chad, etc., which may be explained but not justified. Achievements of a given nation by virtue of its political leadership build its image throughout the world. In fact, derogatory media coverage about India is a consistent feature, not just in UK, but throughout Anglo-American West. If and when India undergoes genuine inclusive growth and development under a dynamic leadership, that doesn't mean India's image to the West will improve. On the contrary, in all likelihood, it will probably get far worse before it gets any better. During the early 20th century, Western media circle projected Japan and China that was even much worse than how India and Third World is being projected today. During early 20th century, Western media aggressively branded Chinese with adjectives like yellow devil and barbarians. Same with Japan. Today, there is an attempt in the West to kill Vietnam by silence, but because of its dynamic socio-political leadership, its image is changing very rapidly. Let's try to explain and not justify the deep-rooted causes of such attitude, not just towards India, but the third world countries in general. We will return to the issue in a moment. Now, let us review some other impressions of neutral individuals from different backgrounds and ethnic groups. They are looking for explanation as to why immigrant Indians are remarkably successful. Their findings may or may not be correct, but their narratives must sound like music in the ears of Indians. Here is the narrative of an American living in India.
Now, when I looked at some of the data, 51% of Indian parents said their goal was for their child to have a successful career, which was far higher than, say, the Americans, who only 20% said they wanted their child to have a successful career. It was higher than other ethnicities as well. It also seems like from other statistics, Indian parents did put pressure on their children to be successful. And hey, maybe this is one of the reasons why they're so successful. 91% of Indian parents aspire for their kids to get a college degree, whereas in the US, only 31% want them to get a college degree. That doesn't seem that good, actually. That's not great. But before we get to the final and most important reason, here's a word from our sponsor. If you like this video and want to see more, please click the like button. This leads me into my final point, which is having a college degree. 77% of Indian Americans have a college degree, 40% have a graduate degree. These numbers are far higher than other immigrant populations, and as we saw, Americans as well. And one of these reasons, or one of these factors, is the H-1B visa. Now, this is a visa in America that brings in highly skilled workers, and Indians get way more of these than other populations. They got 56% of all of them in 2011, I think, and we're seeing similar numbers in other years.
Now, here is the narrative of an African from Congo giving his impression. It is worth listening to his analysis of success story of Indians.
Why do Indians succeed everywhere in the world? I am Britain from Congo in Africa. I have seen many Indians having very successful businesses in my country. And for more than 19 years, when I was in my hometown, Goma, I have been eating bread from a company called Krishna. It's for an Indian. I traveled in most countries of West Africa. And when I traveled in all those countries, I was finding that most of the powerful businesses are owned by Indians. So after being in India for 2 years, I finally learned why are Indians successful no matter where they go.
Those were accounts of Indians who migrated overseas. Now let us come back to the reality and see how the life of 90% non-Anglophonic Indians in India are like. Abject poverty, mismanagement, chaos, corruption are some of the brutal facts of life for all to see. Here is an explanation of how poverty is measured in India.
According to India's poverty line, if you earn more than 32 rupees per day, you're not poor. That roughly translates to 19 rupees 53 paisa on food per day, 1 rupee 63 paisa on rent and conveyance, 1 rupee 32 paisa on healthcare, 99 paisa on education, 2 rupee 36 paisa on footwear and clothing, and 96 paisa on personal items. A penny more and you wouldn't qualify for poverty alleviation schemes. Despite the poverty line being so low, the population that cannot afford to spend even 32 rupees a day is estimated to be very high. The latest official statistics, which came out in 2013, put the number at roughly 270 million, or about 22% of the population.
Here are some clips of torture and privations forced upon most of the Indian population. There is no question that many of these suffering populations have inherent qualities to build and develop institutions and enterprises that may create employment and improve social life, given the right kind of socio-economic environment and governance. Instead, these resourceful members of society are trapped in a socio-economic environment that itself is an impediment to expression of initiative and drive. As the situation is now, one must escape this black hole to find expression of their talent, initiative, and drive. Between 70 to 75 years after so-called independence from British Crown, here is a glimpse of the conditions of general population of India that accounts for 90% of the total. Municipal life forced upon them. Here is India's public transportation. Here is condition of healthcare for 90%. This is condition of drinking water for 90%. Condition of power supply.
बहाल नहीं किया गया तो ये 27,000 करोड़ रुपए साल का बिजनेस देने वाला शहर तरक्की नहीं तनस्सुली की तरफ जाएगा.
Condition of schooling for 90%.
वहाँ पर अंकुश लगाने के लिए जो कदम उठाने चाहिए वो शायद राज्य सरकार उठा पाने में विफल रही है और इस बार आप कह सकते हैं कि टेलीविजन के कैमरे और अखबारों के कारण जो है वो पूरी तरीके से एक्सपोज हो गई है.
Let's now return to the issue and try to explain, not justify, the causes of deep-rooted, of negative attitude of the West towards India, but also the third world countries in general. How can anyone in their right mind ever have any respect for the population of a country, for its government, for its social and political system, when its general population is reduced to this level of privations and resulting degradation? It matters little if there are pockets of excellence popping up amid this level of inefficiency and consequent mismanagement. The most important and valuable resource of a nation is its population. Influence of England, Germany, and France in the world is primarily because of conditioning of its human resource through indigenous, broad-based, culturally oriented schooling, which is a product of their political leadership. In India, as we can see, 75 years of governance has resulted in a socio-economic system where population has to force itself out of the country to find expression of its entrepreneurship and academic skills elsewhere. This serious impediment for economic growth and social development is never discussed in Parliament nor in the mainstream media, as if this problem does not even exist. Church-owned media, who represents the interest of Anglo-American West, on the contrary, glorifies migration of entrepreneurship as sign of development, growth, and prosperity. Indian media have deliberately adopted a design to inflate the significance of Indians appointed as executives in multinational corporations, or Nobel Prize recipients, or in public offices, etc. Most of these achievers might even be embarrassed with the branding of Indian descent. How can anyone ever have any respect for population of a country, for its government, for its social and political system, when its general population is strangled, oppressed, and forced into degeneration while their government, intelligentsia, and elites pretend to be oblivious? Possibility can be ruled out that Indian government is unable to remedy the situation even if they want to, as we shall try to explore shortly. In this context, a pertinent question arises: if socio-political system of India is not made conducive to the expression of inherent qualities of its citizens, and they are to force themselves out of their birthplace to find opportunities elsewhere, then in whose interest this vast landmass, its equally vast natural resources, and its superior human resource is being governed? Most definitely not for Indians. Then in whose interest? We will discuss this in further detail in our next presentation. Let us conclude this presentation by repeating the same statement once again. How can anyone ever have any respect for population of a country, for its government, for its social and political system, when record shows that British conquered India and trampled over 350 million subjects without army, without police, without bureaucracy? It was Indian elites, that is Maharajas, who collaborated with invaders and subsequently enslaved themselves to keep India under the bondage of British invaders. To this day, in India of 1.3 billion and South Asia of 1.5 billion, schooling is designed to scavenge on the leftovers of the West and breed cheap labor for Western market. Finally, how can anyone ever have any respect for population of a country, for its government, for its social and political system, when record shows that siphoning of resources worth $1 trillion from India and other third world countries to the Western banks are continuing with full knowledge of the governments, as the Prime Minister Imran Khan of Pakistan explained?
Mr. President, every year, billions of dollars leave the poorer countries and go towards rich countries. Billions of dollars siphoned off by the ruling elites of the developing world. And they find their way into Western bank accounts, offshore accounts, tax havens, expensive properties hidden behind companies bought in Western capitals. In the 10 years preceding that, our total debt went up 4 times. The debt we had accumulated in 60 years, just in 10 years, it went up 4 times. As a result, the total revenue we collected in 1 year, half of it went into debt servicing. How are we going to spend money on our human beings, 220 million people, when half the money is going into debt servicing? Because our country was plundered by the elites, the ruling elite.
Pakistan Prime Minister explaining how money is being siphoned out of third world countries to the rich countries. In the second part of this presentation, we will discuss whether Indian government can address problems that are hindering inclusive growth that benefits underclass, which is population of most Indians. The answer is no. We will explore why not. If you like what you see, please subscribe. If you like what you see and hear, please subscribe and ring the bell.